You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Something interesting happened, or rather didn't happen, last week at a Seattle City Council committee meeting. There was supposed to be a vote on member appointments to the Seattle Renters Commission. That commission has seats for 15 members, but currently only has 5. The vote didn't happen, and that's because Council President Sara and Councilmember Saka failed to attend, leaving the committee shy of its 3-member quorum. That sparked a lot of outrage, including from Councilmember Alexis Mercedes Rinck, who had this to say.
This isn't a committee meeting anymore. This is just a community meeting. It is council members' chartered responsibility to be at these meetings. This is literally our job. So I find it deeply frustrating that people took time to leave their jobs in the middle of the day, yet not every member of this committee could show up to do theirs.
Many people have criticized the council members' absence, and some are asking whether political motivations were involved. Here to translate what happened and why is David Croman, who covers City Hall for the Seattle Times. David, thanks for being here.
Hi, good morning.
So there's been a lot of speculation about this. What do we actually know about why council members Nelson and Saka were absent from the meeting? What have they said about it?
They've said 2 different things. Councilmember Nelson said that she had requested an excused absence in advance, and didn't really provide a reason for what exactly she was doing. Whereas Councilmember Saka said that he had sort of some personal conflict and therefore couldn't go. We know that, though, that Councilmember Saka was in the building at the time, and so I think that kind of raised the question of why he couldn't have kind of strolled over and participated in this meeting and what was going on there. So, we have what they say, and then there's, speculation about the real motivations.
How common is it for a committee to not reach quorum, to not have the minimum number of members?
It's not very common, because, usually, as Councilmember Rinck said, there's a lot that goes into being a city council person, but at the end of the day, the kind of number one job is showing up to meetings and voting on them. And so if somebody knows that they're not going to be able to show up to a meeting, there usually is enough advance warning about that, and they reschedule the meeting. So it's not that often that you actually have people show up in council chambers and then look around and say, whoops, we don't have enough people to do anything here, right? I can probably count on, 1, maybe 2 hands, the number of times that's happened in the decade that I've covered City Hall. So it's fairly rare, just because there's usually some kind of heads up in advance that not enough people are going to be able to be there.
And I think you heard Mercedes Rinck's frustration. There were a bunch of prospective members of this commission, this Renters Commission, who were showing up expecting to have business conducted and have, the appointments made, and then they had wasted their time, basically. And so that was part of her frustration. What's the reason for the larger controversy here, David? I mean, there are motivations being suggested for the absences, right?
Yeah, I think there's a few layers to this. The first layer is Councilmember Rinck's position on this council. She is, even calling it a minority is probably understating it. I mean, she's really kind of on an island in her own. She's the sole kind of consistently progressive voice on this council. And, there is a frustration about this meeting in particular. But, she has this other committee that she leads about planning for responding to the Trump administration. It's a special committee, and she has kind of struggled with getting a quorum, enough people to show up to that also. So this is kind of on for her agenda has been an ongoing frustration, that this feeling that her fellow council members are not sort of doing their part to help her conduct the business that she wants to do. And some of that might have to do with the fact that she's this progressive council member. The other piece is that the kind of main agenda item at this particular council meeting was appointing people to this Renters Commission. And this was this commission that was established in 2017, basically an advisory commission made up of renters that can make recommendations and sort of advocate for renter priorities. For the last year and a half, it's only had 5 members. It's supposed to have 15 members. And so this was the meeting in which they were going to start filling that commission. But Councilmember Kathy Moore, before she resigned earlier this month, had been kind of in the process of trying to rebuild this commission. She wanted it to be a more kind of even mix of renters and landlords, which is, as you can understand, slightly controversial among people who want to see it as a purely renter body. The night before this meeting, despite the fact that she no longer serves on the council, had emailed both Councilmember Saka, Council President Nelson, as well as Councilmember Mark Solomon, basically saying, "Hey, hold off on confirming these people. I think you should figure out exactly what you want this to look like before you put new members on it." Whether or not that email was the thing that made this meeting not happen it's hard to exactly prove the causation there, but it kind of goes to the feeling that this was a kind of a trying to get this meeting canceled on a technicality because of a policy dispute, and I think that kind of is what makes it so controversial.
And Kathy Moore, you point out, a former member, she did send an email. Is there any indication that actually had influence over the council?
It's hard to say for sure. Former council member Moore says she didn't hear from the other council people. Council President Nelson told me in a text that she didn't even see that email. That's not why she showed up. I have not heard from Councilmember Saka, and what we do know is that, like I said, he was in the building at the time. He only gave about 5 minutes notice that he wasn't going to be at this meeting. So it's hard to say exactly, but the fact is, what we can say for sure, though, is one of the kind of main agenda items of this council was to fill this renters commission. And we do know that several of the council people have disagreed with the way that this commission is built. And so it's, they can say what they want. It's a little hard to not see some connection between basically refusing to show up, and some kind of deep-seated disagreements about an agenda item on this. And if you show up, you're going to be on the record about whether or not you're support the people being appointed to this commission. And so in some ways, it looked easier to just not show up at all, and then the vote doesn't go forward.
Yeah.
Again, can't say with 100% certainty that that's exactly what was going on, but it's hard to ignore that completely.
Now, Council President Nelson has said that the makeup meeting is going to happen this week, right? What kind of fallout has there been? And is there extra pressure now? I mean, the mayor's office, for example, had a number of nominees for the commission that they wanted to get appointed. What kind of pressure has been going on to try to get this done?
I think it just became more of a thing than anyone anticipated it would become. And it got a lot of coverage. We covered it, and that several other outlets covered it. And, this is, I imagine, an issue that the council doesn't really want to deal with right before primary elections here pretty soon. And so, yeah, they rescheduled it. Still frustrating for the people who showed up, because these commissions are volunteer, they are not paid positions. These people have other day jobs. They showed up, still didn't get consideration. Now they're going to have to show up again if they want to be confirmed. And so still frustrating for them. But I anticipate that they will probably receive confirmation as early as tomorrow.
Sometimes, David, I feel like these commissions and their appointments, they feel a little like inside baseball.
Yeah.
Why do you think this has gotten so much attention? I mean, why is it a worthwhile story for Seattleites to be aware of? You've kind of talked about the undercurrents that are involved here that tell a bigger story.
Yeah, it's a good question, because there's a million of these commissions.
Yeah.
They're all non-binding. I have questions about whether they're a little excessive. There's and what they actually mean, whether they're giving people a false sense of having influence when in fact maybe they are just a waste of everybody's time. It's possible that I think,
or it's a way to hand out political favors sometimes to have somebody appointed to a commission. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of questions there. Yeah,
a lot of questions about the importance of these commissions, but I think this one got at a deeper conversation that has been happening in City Hall around the relationship between renters and landlords, and the state of housing, and whether the city's laws regulating the relationship between renters and landlords need to be revisited. That has been very controversial, and has cropped up a few times now. Former Councilmember Moore was the one leading that effort before she resigned. And so, in some ways, to your point, it's not so much about the commission here, but it is about what direction this city hall wants to take landlord-tenant regulations. And anytime it comes up, it's going to be controversial. And I think this is a good example of that.
David Croman covers City Hall for the Seattle Times. Always appreciate it, David. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So what is the Seattle Renters Commission and how has its lack of members affected its ability to function? To answer that, we're joined by Kate Rubin. She is the interim co-chair of the Seattle Renters Commission. Kate, thanks for joining me today.
So happy to be here.
All right, Kate. So like I said, we're having you on to try to explain sort of something that might feel a little bit esoteric for the average Seattleite. What is the Seattle Renters Commission and what does it do?
The Seattle Renters Commission is a group of 15 renters appointed by the mayor and the city council and then the commission itself. And we provide information and advice and counsel to the mayor, the city council, Department of Neighborhoods, Office of Civil Rights, and other city departments concerning issues and policies impacting renters across a broad spectrum of issues, basically whatever could impact renters. We are also responsible for choosing the renters on the Seattle Social Housing Board of Directors. And so we go through a process to choose people who would be the best fit for this group.
And what has it meant to only have 5 members on a 15-person commission?
It's been really hard with 5 members. We haven't been able to hold a robust process to fill openings on the Seattle Social Housing Board of Directors because we don't have enough capacity. We had a small list of people who the former commission thought would be a good fit at the time, but we have more information about what it's actually like to serve on that commission. And 2 out of 5 of us were not part of the original interview process, myself included. And so that's been hard because we've had several seats to fill and we've basically run out of people from the old list and don't have the capacity to run a full interview campaign to pick someone who would be really great in that seat. We also are kind of in a space of being responsive to issues as they come up rather than proactive and able to suggest things that the city could do to really improve conditions for renters because it is really hard right now to be a renter. It's so expensive.
Yeah, tell me more about kind of the top issues on your plate right now when it comes to improving things for renters. So cost obviously has to be number one.
Yes, definitely. And tied to that, we've had some wins with the state passing rent stabilization, but it doesn't impact all renters and it really only prevents like the most egregious rent gouging. And landlords have found ways to get around that aren't technically rent, specifically junk fees. That's something that we would really love to see tackled, banned in this city, that these fees are excessive and unnecessary and just taking any dollar they can out of renters' pockets. There's other things too, small things. We don't have a right to air conditioning in this city. So there's people in very hot buildings throughout the summer with no air conditioning who are not allowed to put a unit in their windows. So that's something that we'd like to change. And honestly, there's like a huge list of things that could be better for renters that we just really need to sit down and talk through and come up with proposals and really work with the city council and the mayor's office to get some of these things through. But most of our time has been spent just addressing things as they come up, things like the comp plan, where barely any renter protections were even mentioned.
That's the comprehensive plan, which kind of governs how the city is going to grow over the next 10 and 20 years.
Correct.
Yeah.
And renters are really kind of left out of those conversations entirely, other than like where they think we should live, not where we think we should live.
And Kate, can I ask, how long have you been operating on that 5 members out of 15 seats? And what is your understanding of what the holdup has been to get those seats filled?
Oh, gosh, it's been over 18 months at this point, because we were hoping that the old council would approve appointments before they left, and they didn't. So we've had people pending since, I think, probably November 2023. Councilmember Moore would not meet with us to discuss these appointments, but she did speak pretty publicly about wanting to create a rental housing commission that would be 7 landlords and 8 renters. So the same number of people, but renters would be barely a majority in that space.
And when you hear that conversation, and former council member now Moore, the fact that she sent an email to try to encourage this idea of adding landlords to the Renters Commission to have more representation, what is your response to that? I mean, I guess to give the counterpoint, it would be being a landlord has become more difficult in this city because of renters' protections. There are small landlords who say that they might have to get out of the business. I mean, do you think it's legitimate to ask for there to be landlord representation?
Not within the Renters Commission. That to me, that's akin to asking why there aren't men on the Women's Commission.
Yeah, I'm seeing the disconnect there.
So more specifically, like there is a huge power imbalance between renters and landlords, and even if it's harder to be a landlord than it was in the past, it's always been hard to be a renter. And landlords are already pretty organized. And they have the Rental Housing Association Washington that they're organizing through. They have powerful lobbyists and deep pockets. Clearly, they already have connections at City Hall if they're getting former council members to send emails at 2:30 in the morning. And the Renters Commission is mostly just regular people. And I feel kind of in a unique position where in my day job, I also work with renters very closely. I do renter education and organizing and advocacy, but that's not the typical commissioner. And so entering a space and trying to advocate for renters when you're being talked over by well-organized landlords is really alienating. I can't imagine that people would stay in that space for very long. So it would become a landlord commission pretty quickly.
So Sara Nelson, the council president, has called a makeup meeting for tomorrow. What are your hopes for that meeting? And do you have any indication that, this time those seats will get filled?
I'm cautiously optimistic. I was actually feeling pretty confident when Councilmember Solomon said that he was going to take this on and make sure that those seats were filled. He also created a safe and stable rental housing working group for renters and small landlords and nonprofit landlords to all come together to discuss the various issues that we're facing and see if we have any common ground or solutions that we could come up with. So he did create a space for that instead of trying to take the space that we have. I think that had there not been such public outcry to Council President Nelson and Councilmember Saka just not showing up to that meeting, this wouldn't be happening. But I am glad that there is now public pressure and a lot of eyes on them to do the right thing. So hopefully those appointments get filled and we'll have a fully seated commission.
Kate Rubin is co-chair of Seattle's Renters Commission. And it does sound like with only 5 members out of 15, that's been a lot of extra work lately. Kate, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. And hey, this show is only possible because listeners support us. If you are able to give right now, check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.